4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live. It's been live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
It's the Nightmare on Elm Street, Sam.
Right.
The Freddy Krueger of Jeffrey Epstein will not go away. Now there's a new twist, and a very important one. The UN experts on human rights have weighed in, and they have indicated that this network of exploitation of young women was far more extensive than we have believed to this point. That so much has been held back by the Trump administration, and a much more extensive investigation is needed.
Pretty horrific stuff.
It really is.
Let's get straight into that topic.
Yeah.
A panel of independent experts appointed by the United Nations Human Rights Council is calling for an independent and impartial investigation of alleged sex crimes contained in the Epstein files. The UN panel says, quote, "So grave is the scale, nature, systematic character, and transnational reach of these atrocities against women and girls that a number of them may reasonably meet the legal threshold of crimes against humanity. This also comes with the breaking news that former Prince Andrew in the UK has been arrested, the first British monarch since the 17th century.
Wow. Of course, he was first stripped of his royal standing.
That's why I said ex-prince.
Ex. You were right on it. And exactly, Sam, why was he arrested?
I believe he was arrested for sharing state secrets with Epstein.
When he was the trade envoy for Great Britain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and of course, we knew he had a very cozy relationship with Epstein and was, at least circumstantially, deeply involved in the exploitation of young women.
Right. And I mean, the crazy thing is, I don't think he was actually arrested for any sex crimes. But
no, I don't think he was. He was arrested for treason, I think.
Something like that. I don't know.
Some British version.
The British version.
British version.
I know the British version of treason.
Yes.
Treason.
Treason.
Yeah, you have to say it like that. That's the British version.
And, of course, Britain and Europe has been taking this much more serious than authorities in the United States. Pam Bondi, the toady Attorney General, her appearance before Congress was widely panned as the worst appearance maybe in recent memory. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Because we've had truly horrific appearances before Congress. RFK Jr. immediately springs to mind, or Pete Hegseth. But this was horrible. We're dealing with the exploitation of young women, perhaps on
girls.
A vast...
Let's be specific. Girls. Yeah,
girls, right. Perhaps on a vast international scale. And what's the best? That the chief law enforcement officer of this country, who is not Donald Trump's lawyer, he has his own White House lawyer, who's our lawyer. What's the best she can do? Prepare ahead of time canned insults to hurl at members of Congress rather than substantively answering any of those questions. In fact, I would say, maybe this is the first time I've seen this, the parody of her appearance on Saturday Night Live was probably better than the actual appearance. It probably said more than the actual appearance of Pam Bondi. Bondi. I don't want any insinuations with Bundy.
Right.
You should be ashamed of yourself. But we know Trump and his sycophants, they have no shame. They think they can do whatever they want and not be held accountable. And they are not wrong. They almost never are held accountable for anything they do. So why in the world should they stop? There's no self-censorship. There is no shame. But let's get back to the UN. This is really serious. We are talking about a major report by UN experts in human rights, experts on violence against women and girls, experts on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order, experts on the right to non-discrimination, experts on the right to privacy, experts on human rights. We can go on and on. These are the world's leading experts in this area. And what they say is astonishing, goes way beyond anything we've heard so far. They have said, quote, the so-called Epstein files contain disturbing and credible evidence of systematic and large-scale sexual abuse, the trafficking and exploitation of women and girls. These acts, they suggest, could amount to, quote, sexual slavery, reproductive violence, enforced disappearance, torture, inhumane and degrading treatment, and femicide. And here's the context, and this is really important. This isn't just random. This fits within a context of what we've seen from rich, powerful, connected men in America and around the world. This is critical. The experts say, quote, these crimes were committed against a backdrop of supremacist beliefs, racism, corruption, extreme misogyny, and commodification and dehumanization of women and girls from different parts of the world. Something we've been warning about for years on this show, right, Sam? We've been warning about misogyny. We've been warning about racism. We've been warning about the attempt of the rich and powerful to dehumanize, to belittle, to smear their opponents as vermin or not real Americans. This is what happens when you tolerate and even foster a culture of supremacist, racism, corruption, misogyny, and dehumanization of others. This did not come out of nowhere. It said, the experts said, this should shock the conscience of humanity and raise terrifying implications of the level of impunity for such crimes. And here's the point you made, Sam, which is astounding. The UN does not lightly use this word. Usually it's for mass, murder and ethnic cleansing and things of that nature. They said that so grave is the scale, nature, systematic character, and transactional reach of these atrocities against women and girls that a number of them may reasonably meet the legal threshold of crimes against humanity, the most serious crimes that could be committed. These were the crimes first recognized, of course, at the famous Nuremberg trials of the worst of Nazi war criminals and Nazi perpetrators of genocide. So this is not something that the UN throws around lightly. This is something of the highest level of alarm for all of us. But the most important point, and I cannot stress this too much, this does not come out of nowhere. It is part and parcel of the perpetration of racism, misogyny, dehumanization of one's opponents, extreme nationalism, entitlement, the belief that because you're rich and powerful and well-connected, somehow the same standards of morality, even of law, and even of basic human decency somehow do not apply to you. The experts stress any suggestion that it is time to move on from the Epstein files. Let's just move on from crimes against humanity. Any suggestion that it's time to move on from the Epstein files is unacceptable. It represents a failure of responsibility towards victims. Resignation of implicated individuals alone are not an adequate substitute for criminal accountability. So Larry Summers steps down from his appointment at Harvard. Brad Karp steps down from the head of his big law firm. Other important people step down. So what? that's really minimal. Most of these people are at the end of their careers anyway. They're already rich and well situated. It's scarcely a punishment. And as we've said so many times, their apologies, are as phony as a $3 bill. They're not remorseful for their relationship with Epstein, and worse yet, their perpetration of the kind of culture that leads to this crime against humanity. No, they're not remorseful about that. What are they remorseful about, Sam?
Getting caught.
Getting caught. Did any of them come out before they got caught and fess up? Of course not. And, just listen to their mealy-mouthed, twisted, explanations. It's the Sergeant Schultz defense for the most part. You know who Sergeant Schultz was, the fictional character?
No, sir.
He was way back in this show, Hogan's Heroes. He was a Nazi prison guard and big fat guy. And every time something came up, I know nothing. I see nothing. We have all these relationships with Epstein, right? But we know nothing. We see nothing. We're pure as the driven snow. Everything was just incidental, even though almost all these relationships took place after he was a convicted sex offender, after they knew exactly what he was. One of the worst offenders is Howard Lutnick. Who's Lutnick, Sam?
Commerce Secretary?
Commerce Secretary, a cabinet official, one of the highest posts in the nation, who lied through his teeth. He said, I cut off contact with Epstein, before his conviction in the early. Turns out not true. He continued contact with Epstein well after he was convicted of soliciting prostitution and became a sex offender. Even as late as 2012, I think, his family was talking about taking a vacation. Guess where, Sam?
Epstein Island.
The Epstein Island. And this guy is still Secretary of Commerce. How is that possible? I guess Trump is still President of the United States, so anything is actually possible. And, I want to read to you some of the most disgusting, implicating emails. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And what is worse is this, horrific so-called Justice Department, but it's just, an arm of the White House, covering up offenders in the emails by redacting the names, not of the victims. They did redact a lot of victims' names, but not all of them, and the victims are up in arms, the survivors, but redacting the names of people who are obviously serious offenders here, and absolutely no reason other than a cover-up. Let me just give you a couple of redacted examples. Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty. Why in the world would they need to redact the sender of that email, Sam?
I have no idea.
It's obviously not one of the survivors, so they're not predicting any survivors. Here's another one, redacted. And there are so many of these that are redacted. I just met redacted today. She is like Lolita from Nabokov. You know who Lolita was?
No.
She was this little girl who this older man was obsessed with in this novel by Nabokov, and it also became a very famous movie. She's like Lolita from Nabokov, a little girl, femme miniature. So now I should send you her type of candidates only. Why in the world would you redact something like that?
No idea.
No idea. But, look at some of the awful things that weren't redacted. Guy I respected, but no longer. Noam Chomsky.
I know, weird, huh?
A towering figure of American linguistics, political analysis. He reportedly told Epstein to ignore, quote, the hysteria that has developed about abuse of women. Hysteria about the abuse of women should be forgotten? No. How can you assuming this is true, and it seems to be, how can you possibly say something like that? Then there's another figure I'd respected. Hope I pronounce his name right. You can help me.
I'll help you. Don't you worry, sir.
Deepak Chopra.
I think that's right.
Invited him to Israel, saying, quote, bring your girls, unquote. Oh, my God. Elon Musk, who I'm not surprised, says, quote, what day/night will be the wildest party on your island? Oh, my God. He knew what was going on that island. Here's a guy who just got elevated to a commentator on CBS, the network that, what is it, the Ellisons and Barry Weiss, the new CEO, are dragging into the ground. He's a doctor and so-called longevity influencer, and he wrote what may be the single most nauseating email. He wrote to Epstein years after Epstein became a registered sex offender. I hate to say this, but, we're all adults, right, Sam? Pussy is indeed low carb. Still awaiting results on gluten content, though. Oh, my God, what could be more stomach turning than that? But it's just indicative of the attitude towards women that these wealthy, well-connected men shared. And by the way, I don't know this for sure, but I've read reports that he's still a CBS contributor. He hasn't been fired, although I don't believe he's been on air yet. How can you possibly keep that guy on your network as someone who is going to be dispensing life advice to the American people? Just shows again, how impervious this network is to the most basic standards of morality and ethics. Brad Karp, the head of Paul Weiss, which was, by the way, one of the first law firms to unconscionably cave to the pressure of Donald Trump and to agree to do pro bono law work for interests that Donald Trump has. He revealed a quote-unquote warm relationship with Epstein. And he thanked Epstein for a dinner, having dinner with this guy. He described as, quote, once-in-a-lifetime event. Can you imagine that, Sam? And told Epstein, you're amazing.
Ew.
Oh. And Steve Bannon, once all this new stuff began to come out on Epstein, I think it was 2018. Was Steve Bannon offended?
No.
No, he said, quote, first we need to push back on the lies and, quote, rebuild your image as a philanthropist. Oh, my God. Rebuild the image of one of the worst sex traffickers in the history of the world? Right.
That's pretty horrific. I just wanted to clarify that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince, was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. But he's already been released. But he
spent one night in jail?
I don't know, but he's already been released. But he's still under investigation. I don't know if that's a formal crime or what that means exactly. Obviously, I don't know British law at all, but
there was a woman who 10 years ago bounced a check for under $100 and got arrested by ICE and detained, not just one night like this guy, but for months. The contrast between the rich and the privileged and the ordinary victims now of the terror we're seeing wrought on our country could not be more stark. And I have to include another one of my old buddies. So,
no, this guy's not. You have too many old buddies that I've never met before.
Well, I knew him in the 60s.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Wait,
you were part of the debate crowd.
You were alive in the 60s?
Barely.
Oh, my God. You were what, 3 years old?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Summers writes to Epstein, I'm trying to figure out why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission at Harvard. But hit on a few women 10 years ago, and you can't work at a network or think tank. Can you imagine that horrific thinking? And then he added, this is to Epstein, the sex offender, said, do not repeat this insight. Oh, my God. Who cares about hitting on a few women? And, you know, we know how much more was involved than, quote unquote, hitting on a few women. Disgustingly, Summers also asked Epstein, of all people, a sex offender, a sex trafficker, for relationship advice.
Ew.
Can you imagine that? You might want to be asking, you know, Ted Bundy for politeness advice. That's about how horrific it is.
You know, as a millennial, you know, this is sort of a derogatory term, but these guys are such boomers. You know, they, like Larry Summers there says, you know, don't tell anybody I said this. Bro, you wrote it in an email. I don't know. My generation knows that anything you put online in an email, even in a private text message, you know, can eventually see the light of day. I don't quite get... Again, I guess the reasoning is because they're boomers, because they didn't realize...
No, you're missing the point. The reason is they think they're invulnerable.
Okay, maybe that
They think they'll never be held accountable for anything, and they're not wrong. So Larry Summers isn't teaching at Harvard anymore. Big deal. The guy's almost 80 years old, so he had to retire. What kind of punishment is that? You know, Bill Gates, who's involved in this, still has, God knows, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars. Brad Karp had to step down from Paul Weiss, but he still reaps all the riches, you know, from all those years as head of that big law firm. I'm sure still has his, you know, circle of friends around him. Elon Musk is still the richest person in the world. You know, Peter Attia hasn't been fired, as far as we know, from CBS. I can go on and on and on. You know, Europe is taking this seriously, doing real investigations. Trump administration is doing nothing, just as they seem to be doing nothing seriously to investigate the homicides of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. The latest news is in the investigation of the Preddy homicide, and I'm using the word homicide correctly. There are only a few causes of death, right, Sam? Suicide, illness, accident, and homicide. Homicide means the death at the hand of another. Clearly, these are homicides. Whether they're justifiable homicides or homicides in self-defense, that's another matter. That's for investigation. I'm, of course, way skeptical of any of that, but they're homicides and should be investigated as homicides. And instead, the FBI won't even share its information with the Minneapolis or Minnesota law enforcement who are responsible for investigating and prosecuting homicides within their jurisdiction.
Our second topic of the night. President Trump convened the inaugural meeting of his newly formed Board of Peace at the United States Institute of Peace headquarters on Thursday. That's today. Unveiling funding pledges and outlining plans for a possible Gaza reconstruction.
Sam?
Yes?
Who are these countries, do we know, that are involved in this Board of Peace?
I know a lot of our allies have refused to join the board, and they say that it
is Canada in it?
They say that it undermines the UN.
Exactly. Is France in it?
No.
Is England, with whom we have a special relationship, in it? No. It's, as far as I know, it is some of the most authoritarian, dictatorial nations in the world, not our democratic allies. And, you know, he's pumping money into this so-called Board of Peace, while at the same time, we owe the UN over $2 billion that Trump is stiffing them. So,
and I heard that he was going to pledge $10 billion to the Board of Peace.
Where's he going to get it?
Right, and I thought his whole issue with these things, like the UN, is that, the U.S. pays too much, but on his own Board of Peace, he wants to give 10 billion US dollars. I think it's really all about control here, right?
It's all about control, and it's all about undermining the UN.
Right.
You know, so you got Kazakhstan, Albania, Morocco, Argentina, countries like that, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, who seem to be involved. No Britain, no France, no Canada, no Australia, no Denmark. He loves Norway, right? He's always talking about how much I love Norway and how much I want immigrants from Norway. Is Norway here? No. It's authoritarian nations for the most part. And this is a means of undermining and destroying the UN, which has been a goal of Trump for a long time. Plus, we have no idea whether this money is ever going to materialize. And two, what exactly Trump means when he's talking about rebuilding Gaza. Remember, he talked about rebuilding Gaza like it was a glittering casino, not something that would be a continuing homeland for the Palestinians.
Right.
Is he benefiting himself? Imagine that from this, or is he really concerned with the Palestinians? That's a very big question, and I'm very skeptical of the answer to that. By the way, another related story, the Trump Organization has just demanded trademark rights to entities that have Trump's name on them. Another grift of Trump's presidency.
I was going to say this Board of Peace feels like just a way for him to enrich himself.
Imagine that. What do we always say in this show?
Follow the money.
Enrich himself, destroy the UN, and make himself kind of the potentate of the world.
But I think this is really revealing because, MAGA and Vance and Trump, they've all been, for years now wailing against, these globalists, yada, yada, yada. But this shows they're not against globalists. They just want their own form of globalism that they control and that they can manipulate.
Crony globalism, I call it. That's what they want. Not real globalism that benefits the people in general. Crony globalism that benefits Trump and his sycophants around the world. That's why our staunchest allies, the strongest democratic governments, are not involved in this.
Speaking of peace, the Defense Department is spending a large array of additional weaponry to the Middle East. They're sending more weapons to the Middle East. But I thought Trump was just at the Board of Peace. I'm confused.
It's a little confusing.
Including more warships, air defenses, and submarines in preparation for a possible military strike in Iran if President Trump makes that decision. And this is 12 minutes ago from CNN. Trump apparently just extended his Iran decision timeline to 10 to 15 days. He says that Iran has 15 days to reach a deal or face an unfortunate outcome. Wait, I thought he was the peace man. I'm so confused.
I thought he was saying, unlike all those Democrats and those rhino Republicans, I'm not starting wars. I'm not getting involved in these conflicts in places like the Middle East. I'm going to focus on the homeland and not fight these feckless wars again. One of the Lichtman rules of politics is whenever a candidate tells you we're not going to war, what can you be sure is going to happen, Sam?
We're going to war.
1916, Woodrow Wilson campaigns. He kept us out of war. 1940, of course, within a month of his inauguration for his second term, we're in World War I. Franklin Roosevelt, 1940. I'm not going to get us involved in the war. Of course, 1941, we're in the war. George W. Bush, 2000. I'm not going to be like those Democrats. I'm going to be humble around the world. Gets us involved in 2 wars. I forget Lyndon Johnson in 1964. Unlike that warmonger Barry Goldwater, not going to get us involved in war. One of my favorite lines, if it's true, was from Barry Goldwater, who said, "They told me if you voted for Barry Goldwater, there'd be war. And sure enough, I voted for the son of a bitch, and we got war." And the latest example is Trump in 2024.
I think he's going to taco again. I think 15 days is going to come, and he's going to either, I'll give him 30 days and nothing will ever happen, I don't think.
How many extensions has he given the Russians?
Right, exactly.
Now he just has to, I think he just gave another ultimatum, that they have to end the war by whenever.
Yeah.
Utterly meaningless. But don't assume he won't do something stupid. You can never assume what Donald Trump might or might not do.
Our next topic. The Trump administration acknowledged violating court orders issued by New Jersey's federal judges more than 50 times over the past 10 weeks in cases stemming from the Trump administration's mass deportation push. 50 times in 10 weeks? That's a lot.
It's a lot. The only thing surprising here is they admitted it. Of course, they said it was just a mistake. Yeah, 50 some odd mistakes in, a matter of 10 weeks. No other administration has come close to that. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. According to other reporting across the nation, from the beginning of Trump's deportation efforts, there have been 4,400 court orders against him, most of which they've ignored. Again, they believe that they owe nothing to anyone. They don't believe in checks and balances. They don't believe in the separation of powers. Trump has said it. Again, he's not subtle. He's not the hidden hand president. He's the open hand president. Said it right out many times. I can do whatever I want as president. I'm not sure Andrew Jackson ever said this, but it's been quoted. John Marshall, the Chief Justice, has made his decision. Let him enforce it. Who's one of Donald Trump's favorite presidents, Sam? Andrew Jackson. And, he seems to be following that model, even though Andrew Jackson may never have actually said it. It's only attributed to him. Under Trump, the other branches of government really, in his view, shouldn't matter at all.
Thank you to Girthon17XD23 for becoming a member. We appreciate that.
And we can use some donations.
President Trump has unleashed a bombardment of debunked election conspiracy theories as he pressures Senate Republicans to do whatever it takes to pass new voting restrictions. The president recently shared a flurry of posts on his Truth Social platform, pushing false claims about the 2020 election, how it was stolen, and demanding the Senate Republicans pass new legislation that experts say, like this guy, say would disenfranchise millions of Americans.
He's trotted out the same lies that were rejected by every court, 60 court cases that he lost. And he claims, I lost them all on procedure. Not true. Your substantive claims were all debunked and rejected. One conservative judge, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, a Federalist Society member appointed by a Republican president, called your evidence a stitched-together Frankenstein monster. That's how bad it was. Judges appointed by you yourself, Donald Trump, rejected your claims of fraud. Your own Justice Department called your claims of fraud. And this is your great loyalist, William Barr, BS. Your head of cybersecurity said the same thing. Every election official across the country, most of them Republicans, debunked what you had to say. You reprised some of the same lies that your flunky Rudy Giuliani told to the Georgia legislature that was so thoroughly debunked that it cost him his law license and cost him, for some of them, a $140 or so million judgment against him by two African-American election workers that he defamed. This is beyond unconscionable. This is maybe the greatest frontal attack on American democracy since the turn of the 20th century, at least since the era of Jim Crow. 21 billion Americans do not have at hand documentary proof of citizenship. Poof. you would disenfranchise them, even though they did nothing wrong. Women who change their names would somehow have to prove, that the documents are the same, putting in jeopardy the voting rights of who knows how many women. For what? Supposedly to combat fraud committed by non-U.S. citizens. That's been studied and studied time and again. And as I said, a non-U.S. citizen is more likely to be hit by lightning than to illegally vote in an American election. The numbers and percentages are so small, you can't even calculate them.
Thank you to D Cause for becoming a member. We appreciate that.
Nice. We love the members.
All right, we will now move on to our question portion of the show. We have almost 1,500 people watching, but only 400 likes. Make sure you like the stream. It helps us a lot. If you're new, click that subscribe button. Click that notification bell so you know we're live. We're live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Remember that donations and memberships get priority in the question portion of our show. And our first question is a big donation from George Politis. They say,
we love him.
Do you think Trump is just doing these military operations to try and show he's a strongman and America is invincible?
I think that's a reasonable hypothesis. Trump likes to show off. He likes to show he's the toughest kid on the block. Yes, that's right, Mr. Bone Spurs. We know how tough you are. Aside from that, you never know with Trump. That's the problem. Many thought that's what he was doing in Venezuela. And, of course, he went beyond that. He didn't start a quagmire war there. But I put nothing past him, although your hypothesis is probably more than 50% likely to be true, but not 100%.
You said new kid on the block. I think you meant block, right?
Block,
right?
Yes. You know what? When they see me coming down the block, they know there's going to be a rumble tonight.
Right. This is a $5 donation from our friend Philip H. Did you see Trump's latest Epstein distraction? He just announced he will be releasing all the files regarding aliens and spacecraft, all redacted probably.
Oh, my God. You never know how far Trump is going to reach. But, he's not ashamed by the Epstein files because he has no shame. Nothing could shame him. As he said, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose my support, as if he didn't care about killing someone on Fifth Avenue. But aside from that, he has no shame. But the Epstein files have really taken a bite out of him because they've done the one thing against which he has no defense, and that is embarrassment. He can't stand being embarrassed, and that's why he desperately is reaching for anything possible to distract from the Epstein files. But you know what? Is it going to work, Sam?
No, definitely
Of course not.
I don't think there's going to be anything in any of these files.
It's going to be all redacted, as you say.
Oh, well, no. Well, yeah, but even if it wasn't, I don't think anything crazy is going to be in them. But this all started with an Obama interview with Brian Tyler Cohen.
Yes.
Where he jokingly said, he said that Brian Tyler Cohen asked, do aliens exist? Obama said yes, and then later clarified that he believes they exist.
Yes.
But he never saw any evidence of it while he was president. Why did Epstein have so much influence over people, including people who seemed decent?
They weren't decent. Your word is right. Seemed decent. None of those people that I can see implicated in the Epstein files were decent people. They were all part of what the UN called, right, a culture of corruption, racism, misogyny, dehumanization from others. There is no decency here. And as I said, the mealy mouth, twisting excuses just won't fly. In my view, they just make these people less decent and more involved. And why? Again, I think the UN put their finger on it because they're all part of this toxic culture. And they believe, like Trump, they can do anything they want and will never be held accountable for it. And so far, they're not wrong. No one in the U.S. has been seriously held accountable. No one.
Back to the alien and spacecraft documents. remember early in his term when he released like the MLK files and the JFK files? Like those were a complete and total
complete bust. They added nothing to what we already knew.
This is a $10 donation from Junaid Naik. They say, have you been watching the Winter Olympics? I don't know why conservatives are attacking Eileen Gu. It seems like racism that is similar in conservatism at the core book.
Absolutely. Why else would they be attacking her other than the racism that I trace consistently over 100 years? Remember the critical argument in my book, which is being borne out every day. Trump is not the betrayal of conservatism. He is the culmination. And by the way, something that chillingly was reported today, Senator Thune, the majority leader in the Senate, said there are 50 votes for this voter suppression bill that came out of the House. Can you imagine 50 senators voting to disenfranchise potentially tens of millions of Americans to no end? For no good end. That is truly chilling and just shows my point. It's not just that, these toady senators and representatives are afraid of Trump. They agree with him. They're on the same page as him. Let's not forget, Trump set the record for support from conservatives in the last election, even beating out the conservative icon, Ronald Reagan.
$10 donation from Free Throw Guy 22. They say, how do we prevent Trump 2.0 in the future from holding office? Do we rewrite the Constitution? This has been a hellish decade.
Can't disagree with that. It's already in the Constitution. We don't need to rewrite the Constitution. We just need to enforce the Constitution, a document which I do not believe Trump has ever read. I do not believe Trump knows what's in the document. Didn't even know his own presidential oath that he took twice and that's in the Constitution. But certainly he doesn't care about the Constitution.
I think maybe they mean like a Trump-type person, like the way Trump is running his administration 2.0, like a similar administration in the future. How do we prevent them from holding office? Maybe they're asking. I'm not sure. If the voters are foolish enough to vote him in, the only way to get him out is either the 25th Amendment, which is almost impossible because it requires the acquiescence of the vice president and a majority of the cabinet appointed by the president, or impeachment, which is equally impossible because it's just, you're not going to get 2/3 of the Senate to vote to convict. This is from member Lovely Danify. They say, what is your take on the current status of the U.S. economy? What do you make of the recent decrease in the unemployment rate, falling gas prices, etc.? Could these things help the GOP in the upcoming midterms?
Look, I'm not an economist, just like I'm not a lawyer, but it's not going to stop me from talking about it. I've read respected economists saying, do not put any faith in these figures. They're 1 month. They're affected by the holidays, by the recent shutdown, by the fact that the tariff impact has not been fully felt. So until we get several months of economic statistics, I read very little into this.
What's your opinions on abolishing ICE?
Absolutely. It's a cancer on the country, to quote John Dean, the White House counsel, and what he said about the Nixon administration. It's not made Americans any safer. It's terrorized our communities to no good end. New statistics just came out confirming what we've been saying for many months. About 73% of those arrested and detained by ICE have no criminal conviction. They're talking about the worst of the worst. They're not criminals of any kind. And most of the rest have convictions only for minor offenses like traffic violations. So this notion that we're getting the worst of the worst, these dangerous peoples out of the country, is another big lie perpetrated by this administration. And as Sam has so eloquently pointed out, the other big lie is that undocumented immigrants generally are, these dangerous killers. In fact, study after study shows that undocumented immigrants have the lowest rate of crime, including violent crime in the country, much lower than native-born Americans, lower even than legal immigrants. And there's a good reason for that. They don't want to get involved in the criminal justice system. And one of the studies by the National Institute of Justice got scrubbed, eliminated, erased from the website of Trump's Department of Justice.
Question from member Alex Kawa, who's always asking very intelligent questions. They say, recent polling has shown that Americans are becoming increasingly conservative on trans rights issues. In large part, I blame Dems for this because too few of them have even tried to counter that widespread GOP misinformation about trans people. How do you think they can effectively do that?
Very, very difficult. Here's the problem. How many trans people are there, Sam?
I have no idea. Not many.
Not many. Yeah. A tiny percentage of the American people. And so when you've got such a minority who seems so different from the majority of Americans, it becomes very difficult politically to mount an effective defense that appeals to 99.9% of the American people. It's the same thing we see with voter ID. Why is voter ID so popular? Because the vast majority of Americans have a voter ID. This is not proof of citizenship. This is just like a driver's license, something on that order. And they can't understand why that's a problem because maybe 10%, a tiny percentage, don't have it. And it's a much more difficult phenomenon when it comes to trans rights. How are we doing on time?
We got about 13 minutes left.
Oh, plenty of time.
Yeah. If you want a last second, two people just sent in 2 donations. So if you want a last second question in, throw your donations in now.
And I'll answer your question.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Have I failed to answer a question, Sam?
No, I don't. Maybe sometimes you say I don't like
I might, on a rare occasion, say I don't know enough or I haven't heard it. I'm not going to make something up, but that's pretty rare.
This is for a donation that just came in from H.F. Callahan. They say, do you think the Fairness Doctrine should be brought back if it were applied even-handedly and not just to Stephen Colbert?
Yes. The Fairness Doctrine is you've got to give roughly equal time to both sides of the political divide or a political controversy. But I have no faith that it is going to be evenly applied under an administration like that of Donald Trump. We saw its totally pernicious, totally evil application by the FCC chair simply to kill an interview with a Democratic Senate candidate.
They're denying it now, of course.
I know they're denying it. They deny a lot of things.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. They denied all kinds of things about virtually every violent encounter with ICE, all of their denials, all their claims completely fell apart once looked at.
This is a question from Girthon17XD23. They say, thank you, Dr. Lichtman, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. My question is, what are the chances that Iran can complete and test its first nuke by 2026? And what would the impact of such an event, what will it have on Trump's image?
Again, I'm not a nuclear scientist, Sam, am I?
You're not?
No, are you?
No.
So I can't really say I think there's a fair chance this could happen, and it would be a tremendously destabilizing influence in the most volatile part of the world. It would probably spark a new arms race in the Middle East and maybe even beyond. We talked about last time, Sam, right?
Right.
About Donald Trump abrogating the last nuclear control treaty and starting, in effect, a new nuclear arms race this would only add to that. But an invasion of Iraq and bogging down in a long-term war, invasion of Iran and bogging down in a long-term war there is certainly not the answer. They had a treaty. Let's not forget that. They had a treaty under Obama, which even the Trump Department of State said was working to stop them getting a nuclear bomb. Who torpedoed that treaty, Sam? Trump. And now he's screaming about Iran getting a nuclear weapon when, in fact, the Obama administration had largely solved that until Trump came barging in, upsetting everything just because he wouldn't accede to anything that seemed to have Obama's name on it.
This is a $5 donation from Andy Haas. They say, do you think Trump being a billionaire has something to do with why he is never held accountable?
Oh, of course. That's absolutely, it's not the only reason. But, there's an old saying, what's the new golden rule in America? He who has the gold rules. Being a billionaire insulates you from an awful lot. You can use your money to launch lawsuits. Pro and con, Trump's been involved probably more lawsuits than any American in history, over 4,000 lawsuits. I recall a number of those who claimed to be victims of Trump's sexual assault, which he openly bragged about, of course, saying they were afraid to go up against someone as rich and as litigious as Donald Trump. It also buys you deference in the courts. It buys you the best lawyers who, file motion after motion after motion to delay and deflect your culpability until it goes away. Absolutely, yes.
This is from member Michael Gonzalez. They say, who is your favorite Republican president and least favorite Democrat president of your lifetime?
In my lifetime, my favorite Republican president was white.
You've got like 200 years, right, for your own lifetime?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much.
I knew Lincoln at the end of his life.
Right.
Yeah. Dwight Eisenhower, my favorite Republican president, he was pressured time and time again, to enter one of these feckless wars. He constantly resisted it. He resisted the far right of his own party and governed as a moderate, what he called modern Republican. Although I admire him as an individual, I got to know him a bit and love the guy. I thought he was an ineffective, if well-meaning president, Jimmy Carter.
This is from member Dirty Your Dog. Professor and Sam, I want you to know I can't watch your show live as I work evenings, but I still watch right when I get home. Thank you, Dirty Your Dog.
Thank you.
My question. The founders appear to have envisioned a president who was a unifying head of state above the partisan fray. At what specific historical juncture did the office definitively shift into the role of party leader? And is that evolution reversible? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Unfortunately, almost right away, Washington was really the only president who stood above politics. He hated political parties because he thought they were divisive, corrosive of national unity in the fledgling republic. And there was, real dangers that the republic would fall apart. And he kept imploring those around him, particularly Hamilton, his ally, the Federalist, and Jefferson, who was developing a political opposition, to stop squabbling politically. Didn't work. There was only one George Washington who genuinely stood above politics. By 1800, in that very bitter election, partisanship had emerged in an incredibly powerful way. The Federalists, who were behind John Adams, vilified Jefferson as a guy who would foment revolution and bloodshed. Blood would run in the streets, they said, if Jefferson was elected. The Jeffersonians pilloried Adams as blind, bald, toothless, and crippled. They argued he would have one of his children marry into the royal family and reestablish the American monarchy. So unfortunately, partisanship and bitter partisanship is about as old as the Republic.
This is a $5 donation from Secular Monk. They say, Professor, given his skepticism of the CIA, do you think that JFK would have continued the war in Vietnam if he served out his first term?
I've written about this quite a bit.
Wow, you're a smart guy.
Yeah, I have a book for everything, right?
Well, you don't have a book about this, do you?
Well, I have a book about great American presidents, in which I include. It'll be out in September. Look for it.
Look for it.
Great American Presidents, Bancroft Press. It's done. It will be out in September. What was the question?
Do you think...
Oh, there is evidence that he was considering it. But again, you know what I think about speculating about counterfactuals, Sam. What would have happened if something was different? We'll never know, of course. You can argue anything you want. It can't be proven. It can't be disproven because you can't replay the tape of history over. But the documents which I have researched do suggest that there is some possibility that would have happened. But we'll never know.
How can we know elections are secure if ballots are, well, I'm not sure what this word is. Anonymized?
I'm not sure.
Anonymized?
I'm not sure what that is. I can't see it.
Anonymized.
Yeah, I can't follow the spelling. It's
too
late.
This makes it impossible post-election to trace the status of those who cast them.
I don't understand the question.
Anonymize?
I guess, but the status of those who cast ballots is established by registration. And as I said, there is illegal voting is so minuscule that, you're more likely to be hit by lightning than to have someone cast an illegal vote. So I'm not sure what they're driving at.
I guess they're saying anonymous?
Of course voting is anonymous, but registration is not.
Made anonymous. Sorry, folks. I'm an idiot.
Voting is always, well, I wouldn't say always, but at least over the last 120, 30 years has been anonymous. It used to not be anonymous. There was a time when you voted by voice, by yelling out your preference, or by casting a colored ballot associated with a particular political party. But beginning in the late 19th and early 20th century, we moved to the secret ballot. I guess that's what they're arguing, the anonymous ballot, which is right and proper.
Philip H. wants to know, what's your favorite animal?
Dogs.
Puppies?
Puppies. Oh, my God. We have one. See here?
Yeah, he's right here.
Right here. He's been such a good pup.
Yep.
Haven't had a peep out of him. I didn't even realize he was here.
If anybody wants to throw in a donation or two, we'll take your question. Let me see.
We're a little short on donations, so that would be nice.
Let me see what else we got here. Have you ever met Anthony Fauci?
I have not.
Is there any progress about getting more of your books on Audible?
I haven't heard, but I will check. I don't, unfortunately, control this. You would think, authors have all this control. We have almost no control. Once we submit a book to the publisher, the title and everything else is in their hands.
People want to see the dog. He's so... he just stirred a little bit. He's just very comfortable
He's very
in his
happy
bed.
in his little bed. I think you showed him before.
I showed him last.
But we have an
episode,
important announcement.
We do?
Tuesday, live.
Right. The State of the Union is a week
Will be
from
covered live
today, and we will be live for the State of the Union.
Live at 9, which the State of the Union begins. We've had very successful past live shows on States of the Union.
Oh, right. Cynthia Gutierrez, someone who's on my channel often, she wants us to do a ranking video of First Ladies. Would you be open to that?
A ranking of First Ladies. I might. Not right now, but...
obviously not right this second, but like...
I'll think about it. I'm not close to that. I have some ideas.
Right.
I'm not the world's expert on it, but I know a lot.
Apologize. Everybody's grilling me for not knowing what anonymized means.
Yeah.
Oops.
I'm not sure that's even a word.
Should I look
Made
it up?
anonymous.
A lot of people in the chat knew it right away, so
Okay.
I'm the dummy.
But we got to it. We got to it.
Well, yeah.
And I analyzed it.
A word. It is a word. Wait.
I don't think it's a word.
It says that having to identify particles or details, especially in medical test results.
All right.
I don't see it as a meaning to mean
No,
anonymous.
it doesn't seem to be. Anyway, it's getting late. We going to do any more questions?
Nope. With that,
We're done.
we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. Thank you all for being here. Shout out to Diego and Paul for your donations who didn't get on air. Dad, what are your final words to the people?
State of the Union. Perhaps not since the era of the Civil War, maybe World War II or the Great Depression, has a State of the Union been delivered under such fraught circumstances for the thriving of our democratic republic. So please tune in for our unique live coverage of the State of the Union Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern.
There's much debate in the chat on whether it's a word or not. You don't care.
I don't care.
All right. Good night.
Good night.